Since the beginning of my channel, I've been using an AI-generated voice due to some personal circumstances. I've always been passionate about true crime stories and wanted to share them with you in the best way possible. This video marks my first attempt using my own voice, and I'd love to hear your honest feedback. Do you think I should continue with my voice, or would you prefer I go back to the AI voice? Let me know in the comments, as your opinions mean a lot to me. Thank you so much for your continued support. Now let's start our today's true crime story.
Would you guys rather suffocate or get shot?
Get shot.
Shot. Wait, depends on where.
Would you rather in the head?
Shot.
There would be no suffering at all.
Eaten by ants or suffocated?
Suffocated.
Imagine the only person you considered a brother and friend is the one who literally stabs you in the back. This is the true crime documentary of Skylar Neese. Skylar Neese, the only daughter of Dave and Mary Neese, was born in February 1996 from a love story that seemed like it came straight out of a movie. Mary found Dave injured and she moved him to hospital where the love started between them, and their love story began. Skylar was their only child, but her parents didn't coddle her. From a young age, Skylar showed signs of something different. She was strong, independent, knew what she wanted. Dave and Mary encouraged it all the way. They knew their daughter wasn't like everyone else, and they were proud of that. It was in elementary school in a quiet part of West Virginia when Skylar met Sheila Eddy. The two clicked fast, becoming inseparable. Sheila's mother had been friends with Skylar's mom since they were kids, so it felt like fate. But Sheila wasn't like Skylar. Sheila had this wild edge to her, and it made her exciting, unpredictable. While Skylar played it safe, Sheila always pushed the boundaries. Coming from a family with money, she was used to getting what she wanted when she wanted. Over time, Skylar and Sheila were closer than ever. Skylar's parents even saw Sheila as part of the family. She stayed over whenever she wanted, walked in and out of the house like she lived there. Skylar trusted her like a sister, but sometimes that trust can be dangerous. Years passed, and Skylar and Sheila's personalities evolved in different directions. Skylar, who once saw Sheila as a sister, always found herself in the role of helping Sheila through problems Sheila often created for herself. Skylar was the responsible one, the anchor, constantly trying to keep Sheila from going too far. In high school, where they met Rachel. Like Skylar and Sheila, Rachel was also an only child, but her background was different. Rachel's family wasn't wealthy. Her mother, an accountant, raised her alone after Rachel's father was disabled, a situation that changed the family dynamic. Rachel wanted desperately to be accepted by Skylar and Sheila, who were already well known around school. She had dreams of becoming a singer, and despite her quieter nature, she found herself drawn into their friendship. Skylar, despite her responsibilities, wasn't immune to teenage recklessness. She had a job at Wendy's that she loved, balancing work with her studies, but there were moments where she let loose. Driving when she shouldn't, drinking, and experimenting with marijuana. She indulged, but she always knew where to draw the line. Sheila, on the other hand, didn't seem to believe in limits. As Rachel became more integrated into their group, Sheila saw an opportunity to manipulate her. Rachel, eager to please, often went along with Sheila's impulsive and sometimes dangerous ideas without hesitation. The once strong bond between Skylar and Sheila started to weaken. Skylar watched as Sheila and Rachel grew closer, becoming inseparable. They'd go out together, dress alike, and make decisions without Skylar. Skylar felt the distance growing between them, and it hurt. She expressed her frustrations online, posting regularly on Facebook and Twitter, a way to vent her growing sense of exclusion. Then came a night in the summer of 2011 that shifted everything. Skylar, Sheila, and Rachel were at Rachel's house. They had alcohol and marijuana, trying to push boundaries as teenagers do. But as the night went on, Skylar noticed something that shook her. Sheila and Rachel were behaving in ways that made Skylar uncomfortable. The night continued, and eventually both Sheila and Rachel end up having sex. This action made Skylar very mad, and she started arguing with Sheila. Sheila, on the other side, was mad also and felt the Skylar wanted to control her. The argument heated, and their voices became so loud that Rachel's mom, hearing the commotion, stepped in and took Rachel away, telling her to sleep in her room for the night. Sheila's anger was visible, her plans for the night ruined, and the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. That moment marked a turning point in their friendship. It was clear now that the cracks between them were growing deeper, and Skylar was no longer sure if things would ever be the same. Since that day, Skylar became an enemy in Sheila's eyes. She saw Skylar as someone standing in her way, someone who constantly obstructed everything she wanted to do. Rachel, on the other hand, remained Sheila's loyal follower. She sided with Sheila on everything, agreeing with her choices and actions every single day. Rachel seemed completely convinced by Sheila's view of the world. The friendship between the three was all but dead, though it hadn't ended completely. Skylar still believed deep down that Sheila could never truly abandon her, not after everything they'd been through growing up. Skylar held on to the hope that their childhood bond would be enough to keep them connected no matter what. But for Sheila, the situation was different. In her mind, there was no doubt about how she felt about Skylar. The bond was already broken. In June 2011, both Mary Skylar's mom and Sheila's mother agreed to take a trip to Myrtle Beach. It was meant to be a break from everything, but tensions were already high. Skylar and Sheila were alone on this trip without Rachel, and as they had done before, they drank alcohol and smoked marijuana. It was during this trip that things took a dark turn. A violent argument erupted between them. It was said that Sheila had tried to push Skylar into something more intimate, something Skylar refused outright. On that fateful day, she told Sheila that she was planning to tell everyone at school about their relationship. It was a threat that Sheila couldn't ignore. Skylar's frustration spilled onto social media, where she began tweeting cryptic messages that hinted she knew the truth. For Sheila, this wasn't just about being exposed. It was about losing control, about facing the shame and consequences of what Skylar could reveal. Those tweets set everything in motion. What Skylar thought was just venting her anger and frustration turned out to be the spark that pushed Sheila and Rachel to make the ultimate decision. Skylar had to be silenced. The next time Sheila met up with Rachel, she could barely contain her fury. The words she said that day were chilling. "This bitch has to die." Sheila's words didn't feel like just a passing comment, but to Rachel, her loyal follower, they were more than that. They were an order, one that Rachel believed needed to be carried out. With each passing day, the idea of killing Skylar became more real to Sheila and Rachel. They started thinking about it, seriously planning and gathering information that would help them prepare for what would become their unthinkable crime. In chemistry class, Sheila boldly asked her teacher about the chemical compound that could dissolve a body, making it disappear. The question was so shocking that the teacher immediately threw her out of the classroom. But it didn't end there. Around the same time, a local girl had gone missing, and it was all anyone could talk about at school. Sheila and Rachel took advantage of the situation, repeatedly asking people about the best way to dispose of a body. Given the circumstances, their questions didn't seem too strange, but what was strange was the way they seemed obsessed with the idea. One student, however, overheard something far more alarming. They heard Rachel and Sheila talking about getting rid of Skylar's body specifically. Concerned, the student told Skylar, but Skylar didn't take it seriously. She shrugged it off, thinking it was nothing more than meaningless talk between friends. She didn't realize the danger she was in. What she dismissed as casual chatter was actually the start of the plan to end her life. Sheila and Rachel had made their decision. After much thought, they agreed to lure Skylar out, kill her, and bury her body far from where anyone would find it. Sheila would bring knives from her mother's kitchen, and Rachel would bring a shovel and a change of clothes. On July the 5th, 2012, Sheila made plans with Skylar to pick her up that night after she got home from work at Wendy's. They'd go for a drive, smoke some marijuana at Moore's Runway, just like old times, or so Skylar thought. That day seemed like any other to Skylar. She finished her shift at work, came home, kissed her parents goodnight, then went to her room. Locking the door, she quietly prepared to sneak out, placing a bench under her window to climb back in later. At exactly 12:30 a.m., Sheila pulled up to Skylar's house in her silver Toyota Camry. Skylar opened her window, climbed out, leaving it open so she could return later. She slipped into the car where Rachel was already waiting in the back seat. This was the last time Skylar Neese was seen alive. On the way, Skylar has no idea what's coming. Rachel sits trembling, her fear clawing at her, but the pull of loyalty to Sheila is stronger than any terror she feels. Her heart races, but her mind follows Sheila, blindly convinced that this dark task will solidify her place in Sheila's twisted world. Sheila, on the other hand, feels nothing but the thrill of what's about to happen. There's no guilt, no hesitation. In her mind, this is going to make her infamous, the girl no one at school will dare to cross. She grips the knife in her hoodie, ready for what she's about to do. The car moves faster than Skylar realizes. Before she knows it, they pull off the road. Sheila checks to make sure the knife is there, tucked securely in her pocket. The air is thick with the tension. None of them speak, but Skylar remains oblivious to the darkness brewing around her. The three of them step out of the car under the cover of night, heading toward the woods. It seems like any other night they've had before smoking marijuana and talking, but this time is different. Skylar doesn't notice the cold glances exchanged behind her back. Sheila casually says they forgot the lighter in the car, asking Skylar to fetch it. Unaware of the horror that's moments away, Skylar turns and walks back toward the car. That's when she hears it, the chilling whisper of a countdown coming from behind her. 3, 2, 1. Skylar spins around and her world shatters. Sheila and Rachel charge toward her, knives flashing in the dim light. Skylar barely has time to react as the blades pierce her flesh, sending her crashing to the ground. She screams in agony, disbelief, filling her voice as she cries out. Her body writhes as she tries to fight back, grabbing for the knife in Rachel's hand. But even as blood pours from her wounds, she doesn't think to defend herself against Sheila, her lifelong friend. The betrayal cuts deeper than the knife. Skylar manages to grab Rachel's knife for a brief moment, summoning the last of her strength to stab Rachel in the heel. But Sheila doesn't let her fight back. With cold precision, Sheila stabs Skylar again and again until her friend's body grows limp. Rachel stumbles back, gaining her balance, as Skylar's life fades away. Without a word, Rachel takes the knife back from Skylar, who is barely clinging to life. Rachel finishes what they started, plunging the blade into Skylar's exhausted body over and over again. By the time they stop, Skylar has been stabbed more than 50 times. Her body lies still, drenched in blood and lifeless. The woods are silent, except for the sound of Sheila and Rachel's labored breathing as they stand over their best friend's corpse, staring down at what they've done. Rachel moves first, grabbing the shovel they brought, but the ground is too hard for the two 16-year-olds to dig a proper grave. In a panic, they drag Skylar's blood-soaked body deeper into the woods, covering her with tree branches in a feeble attempt to hide their crime. Their hands and clothes are slick with blood. They clean themselves up as best they can, changing into fresh clothes before slipping back into the car. The night's horror lingers in the air as they drive home in silence. As dawn breaks, Rachel speaks quietly, telling Sheila she's going to church camp. She needs to disappear for a while to pretend that none of this ever happened. But nothing will ever be the same. That morning started like any other. Dave was running a little late, while Mary had already left for work. Midday rolled around, and as usual, Dave returned home to pick up Skylar. She would drive him in his car, just like she did every day, before heading to her own shift at Wendy's. But when he got home, something felt off. Skylar wasn't there. The door to her room was shut, which was unusual. Worried, Dave quickly called Sheila to ask if she'd seen Skylar. Sheila's voice was calm, telling him she hadn't seen Skylar the previous day, but mentioned they had spoken on the phone around 11 p.m. Dave's unease only deepened. He called Mary, hoping for reassurance. Mary tried to calm him, suggesting maybe Skylar had left early for work or gone somewhere on her own. But Dave knew something wasn't right. Trying to push aside the growing dread, Dave made a cup of tea and stood on the balcony, needing a moment to clear his mind. That's when he saw it. The bench beneath Skylar's window. The one she always used to sneak out late at night. His heart sank. Something was very wrong. Almost immediately, his phone rang. It was Skylar's manager from Wendy's. Skylar hadn't shown up for work. and when they tried calling her, her phone was off. Now, panic set in. Dave quickly called Mary, who could no longer offer any reassurances. Together, they rushed to Skylar's room. Mary flung open the door. Skylar's phone charger was still there, her contact lenses. The window was wide open, a silent witness to her escape the night before. Mary's hands shook as she called the police. Officers arrived quickly, but their response was far from what the parents had hoped for. The police suggested that this was probably nothing more than a typical teenage situation. Maybe Skylar had gone off with a boy and would come back in a day or two. Dave wasn't buying it. He knew his daughter. She wouldn't just leave without telling them. Mary felt the same, and they decided to start their own investigation. Their first thought was the building's security cameras. They went to the landlord and asked to see the footage. As they anxiously watched the grainy black and white footage, their worst fears were confirmed. There was Skylar slipping out of her bedroom window at around 12:30 a.m. She climbed into a waiting silver car and disappeared into the night. They rushed to the police with the footage, hoping this would finally make them take things seriously. But instead, the police explained that, according to state law, they couldn't issue an Amber Alert. Skylar had willingly gotten into the car. They advised Mary and Dave to wait 5 agonizing days. Mary, filled with terror and desperation, posted on Facebook that very day, pleading for help and explaining the situation to anyone who would listen. The following day, unable to wait any longer, Mary went to the state police. This time, the case was taken more seriously, especially since there had been another disappearance of a young girl in recent months. The state police began their investigation, suspecting there could be a connection between the two cases. Sheila, always by Mary and Dave's side, played the role of the concerned best friend, doing everything she could to help find Skylar. The investigators questioned her about the last time she saw Skylar. Initially, Sheila stuck to her story that they had spoken on the phone around 11 p.m. But when she realized there was camera footage, her story changed. Now, Sheila claimed that she had actually picked Skylar up that night. They drove around for about an hour, smoked some marijuana, and then she dropped Skylar off near her house so her father wouldn't hear the car. The investigators noted Sheila's revised story, but didn't push her too hard. They allowed her to leave, but Sheila stayed close, keeping in constant contact with the police and with Skylar's parents, always wanting to know what they had discovered. Meanwhile, Rachel had returned from church camp. When the police asked her about Skylar, she claimed to know nothing about her disappearance. But her mother knew that Rachel is not saying the full truth during the camp. She noticed a cut on her daughter's heel, an injury that Rachel couldn't explain. The investigators called Rachel in for questioning. Strangely enough, her story was identical to Sheila's, word for word. That's when investigator Chris Berry's instincts kicked in. Something was off. It was impossible for two people to recount the same events with such precision without a single variation in detail. Detective Chris Berry, determined to uncover the truth about Skylar's disappearance, decided it was time to dig deeper into the lives of Sheila and Rachel. These were no ordinary teenage girls. Their stories had inconsistencies, and his gut told him they were hiding something dark. To get closer to them without raising suspicion, Chris created fake profiles on Twitter and Facebook, posing as a student from their school. He sent both girls friend requests, and to his advantage, they accepted. Now, Chris could follow their social media activity, a window into their world, and potentially the truth behind their involvement with Skylar. What he was searching for were posts that hinted at power, something teenagers involved in crimes often brag about, even if subconsciously. It didn't take long. A tweet from Sheila caught his eye. "There is no one on this earth who can handle me and Rachel." It was a chilling proclamation. Combined with the history of interactions between Skylar, Sheila, and Rachel, this was enough to convince the investigators that the girls knew far more than they were letting on. The detectives went back to the surveillance footage and watched it over and over. That's when they realized the truth. The car Skylar had gotten into that night was Sheila's. How had they missed it before? For some reason, They hadn't properly verified Sheila's earlier statement that she took Skylar out around 11 p.m., but now they had solid evidence that Sheila had picked Skylar up at 12:30 a.m. right before she disappeared. With this new information, the investigators advised Mary to stay silent around Sheila, warning her that they believed Sheila knew more than she was letting on. The police wanted to gather more evidence before making any moves. Sheila, meanwhile, started to feel the tension. People were avoiding her, and it wasn't long before she reached out to Rachel, desperate for reassurance. Rachel, who was close to the edge, promised to tell Sheila if she learned anything new. The cracks in Rachel's composure were growing wider, and it wouldn't be long before she shattered. Mary, fueled by fear and desperation, took to Facebook and posted a long, emotional message explaining everything they knew so far. She even suggested that it was possible Skylar had been killed. The post went viral, and soon enough, rumors began to swirl. Students at school started speculating that the three girls had been involved with drugs, that Skylar had overdosed, and that Sheila and Rachel had hidden her body. The pressure on Sheila intensified. The police called her back in for another interview. At first, Sheila stuck to her original story, but this time, the investigators had something concrete. They confronted her with the surveillance footage showing that Skylar had gotten into Sheila's car at 12:30 a.m., not 11 p.m., as she had claimed. They pointed out that the car had not gone to the east side of town as she said, but instead it had headed west. Phone records backed up the camera footage. Sheila was visibly rattled. She fumbled, claiming that maybe she had forgotten which direction they'd gone, but with no solid evidence yet directly linking Sheila to a crime, the police were forced to let her go. Meanwhile, Rachel was nearing a complete breakdown. Her mother sensed it, watching her daughter's mental state unravel day by day. By late December 2012, it all became too much. Rachel's mother reported to the police that her daughter was losing her mind, spiraling into a nervous breakdown. The police acted quickly, placing Rachel in a mental hospital to stabilize her. But the guilt was eating away at her. And once she was released, Rachel couldn't take it anymore. On January 3rd, 2013, she walked into the police station. When the investigators questioned her, the truth came pouring out. Rachel broke down and confessed everything. It was her and Sheila who had killed Skylar. When Rachel was asked the haunting question of why they killed their friend, her answer was chilling in its simplicity. We no longer loved her. No deeper motive, no complex reasoning, just the cold reality of how their feelings had changed. Later that day, Rachel, alongside her lawyer and the police, headed to the remote location where the murder had taken place. But once again, fate seemed to throw an obstacle in their path. The entire area was buried under heavy snow, concealing the evidence they desperately needed. The investigators had no choice but to wait, knowing the snow would eventually melt and reveal the grim truth. In the meantime, they attempted to use Rachel's confession to pressure Sheila into admitting her role in the murder. They released Rachel under surveillance, planting recording devices and monitoring her every move, hoping Sheila would say something incriminating. But Sheila was more cautious than they anticipated. She didn't confess and remained silent, slipping once again from the police's grasp. 15 agonizing days passed, and finally, the snow melted. The investigators returned to the location, this time bringing search dogs equipped with GPS devices to comb the area. As they searched, one of the officers noticed that the GPS device had fallen from one of the dogs. While he bent down to reattach it, something caught his eye. Human remains partially buried beneath the melting snow. The remains were carefully recovered, and forensic testing confirmed the worst. In March 2013, the body was officially identified as Skylar Neese. The tragic case had reached a devastating conclusion. As for Rachel, her legal team immediately began negotiating with prosecutors. In exchange for her cooperation and a guilty plea, a deal was reached. On May 1st, 2013, Rachel turned herself in to the police. She pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Sheila, having learned that Skylar's body had been found, took to Twitter, expressing shock and feigned grief for her missing friend. She played the role of the devastated friend perfectly, but what Sheila didn't know was that Rachel had already struck a deal with the authorities. Rachel's confession, along with her agreement to testify against Sheila in court, sealed Sheila's fate. With mounting evidence against her, the police arrested Sheila and charged her with the murder of Skylar Neese. Despite everything, Sheila continued to maintain her innocence, refusing to admit guilt. But the walls were closing in, and soon Sheila was offered a deal. In exchange for her confession, she would receive 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. In 2014, after the trial and sentencing, Skylar's family faced a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like enough. Skylar's father, Dave, wasn't content with the sentence, especially the possibility that the girls could walk free in 10 or 15 years. For him, the punishment didn't match the gravity of what had been taken from them. He vowed to attend every parole hearing, determined to make sure the girls stayed behind bars for as long as possible. In his mind, their lives should be wasted, just like Skylar's had been. In 2024, Rachel's first parole hearing took place. Just as Skylar's father, Dave, had promised years ago, he was there to ensure that Rachel wouldn't walk free. The pain of losing Skylar still fresh in his heart, Dave fought to keep his daughter's killer behind bars.
At this time, the board is not ready to grant you parole at this time.
The words that Neese's family was hoping to hear.
Parole denied.
His efforts paid off, as Rachel's request for parole was denied, meaning she will remain in prison for quite some time before she can appeal for parole again. For Dave, it was a small victory in his ongoing mission to make sure the girls who took his daughter's life serve every day of their sentence. The fight isn't over, but for now, justice for Skylar continues. Now, the question lingers. What truly drove these girls to murder their best friend? Was it the fear that Skylar would expose Sheila and Rachel's intimate relationship, or was it a reckless and senseless act committed by teenagers who didn't understand the value of life? Share your opinion in the comments below. What do you think led to this horrifying crime? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. See you in the next video.